Born in Athens, Greece as an Air Force brat, Teri M. Brown came into the world with an imagination full of stories to tell. She now calls North Carolina coast home, and a peaceful nature of the sea has been a great source of inspiration for her creativity. Now, unlike some of us, she didn't let 2020 get the best of her, and Teri chose to go on an adventure that changed her outlook on life. She and her husband Bruce rode a tandem bicycle across the United States from Astoria, Oregon to Washington, D.C., successfully raising money for Toys for Tots, which is a fantastic charity, which I'm a big fan of. She learned she's stronger than she realized and is capable of doing anything she sets her mind to. And she's just recently launched a new inspirational book, 10 Little Rules for a Double Budget Adventure. Welcome, Teri. I'm really excited to have you on the show. Really very excited.
Thank you so much.
Would love to hear a little bit about your background and kind of your story as to how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so I had, I grew up, my dad was in the Air Force. I started out in Athens, Greece. I always loved the fact that I was not born in a military hospital, which gave me dual citizenship until I was 18. And as a kid, boy, I milked that. That was great to have something different than the other kids. People have asked me if I'm an author. And so people have asked me, like, did you always want to be an author? And the answer is yes, but I don't think that I recognized how much I wanted it. Because as a kid, I said I wanted to be an author, but I also said I wanted to be a heart surgeon and I wanted to be an Olympic ice skater. And I can't, yeah, Olympic ice skating is never something that was going to be part of me. Okay. Like I can't walk and chew gum. And I don't like the sight of blood. So I was never going to be a surgeon either. So I don't think I knew what that meant, but what I knew was I loved books. And I've had a love affair with books from, I don't ever remember not reading. I've always been a reader. But then life kind of gets in the way and you grow up and you go off to college and your parent says, writer, no, that isn't going to be a thing. You have to have something that will make money, that you have to, you're going to have a job. And so, and then I got married and I had children and it just didn't happen. I ended up as a single mom of four. I remarried, and that marriage was a very bad mistake. He was emotionally abusive. I lived in that marriage for 14 years because I didn't want to be divorced a second time. I'm stubborn that way. During that time, I really began to know that I wanted to be an author, but I was too afraid. And I think when you're letting your soul out onto paper, and your characters and your things and you're out there, that you have to have like a safe place to land
Yeah.
because the world can be kind of cruel, right? If they don't like
Mm-hmm.
something that you produced, ooh. And so you need someone who's going to like wrap you up in a warm hug. And I didn't have that. And so there was no way that I was going to write. I got out of that relationship and the words started falling out of me and I wrote several manuscripts, but I was very damaged. And there was no way that I could show what I was writing to anyone. I met my now husband. I was never getting married again. That could be a whole nother podcast. But he wanted to do this adventure. It was something he's wanted to do since 1976, was ride across the United States on a bicycle. I wanted to do something big and bold because I thought I needed to prove to people that I still had some worth, some value. Turns out I needed to prove that to me, but at the time I thought it was others that I needed to prove that to. And I thought, huh, riding a bicycle across the United States, that could maybe prove a thing or two. So I asked him, is this something you're going to talk about until the day you die, or are you really doing it? And he said, no, I really want to do it. And I said, count me in. I had no intention of marrying him. I figured that we could just do an adventure together. And then, if I didn't like him at the end of it, we could just part ways, right? That was, in
It's a
the end,
pretty
we got
big.
married and then we did the adventure.
Yeah.
Um, but it was at the end of 3,102 miles on a tandem bicycle, over several mountain ranges. I'm a desk jockey. I am not in any way athletic. I like the outdoors, but like picking up shells along the beach, not big. My husband, on the other hand, he's run marathons and triathlons, and he's the adventurer. And so for him, this was a dream, and for me, it was like huge. It was like well outside of my comfort zone. And as we are coming the last couple of miles, and I realize we've made it, and it makes me get teary when I think about it. I thought, oh my gosh, I can do anything. I can do anything I set my mind to. I just rode across the United States on a bicycle. I can do anything. What do I want to do? And I thought, I want to be an author. And that's kind of where it started. I finally then, I tell everyone that that ride, we raised money for Toys for Tots and I healed my heart.
Mm.
And I came out of it and just recognized it's no longer a matter of can I do something? It's a matter of do I want to put the energy into doing it? Is it something I really want? Because if I really want it, then I got it.
And I think there's a couple of things in there that you touched on that I think are really important. And I've mentioned this before on a previous episode of the show that when I was sort of coming up with the idea and was just about to launch and was thinking about the concept of this and home and stuff like that. And there's a local bar to near where I live called the Filling Station. It's a pizza restaurant and bar, and it's a good group in there. It's very Alabama, right? It's a
Yeah.
great bar, and I really like it, and the people are super friendly. And I go there maybe once a week or so. And
Mhm.
I was sitting there just talking to some random guy at the bar just around. And he goes, "Oh, what do you do?" And we're talking about the podcast thing. I was like, this is going to be about the meaning of home and what does home mean to people. And he kind of didn't get it. He was like, well, surely home is just where you go each night. It's where you sleep. And I said, to you. And I think your story says that, right? You, in that 14 years, it doesn't sound like it felt like home because you never felt
No,
safe enough to be who you wanted to be.
exactly. I have children that lived with me there through that with from my first husband, and I did my best to make it home for them and make things as good and calm for them as possible. So I was taking on the brunt of the ugly to
Mhm.
keep things. But no, I was never really safe there. The only time I felt safe was if he went away.
And
When he
that,
wasn't home, then it was safe.
yeah, and I think that's a perception that a lot of people don't get, and I think
Right.
unfortunately it's a perception that a lot of people live with as a part of day to day life. It's
Yeah.
that, and I think it's one of the reasons I wanted to do this show is to have those stories come out. So it's like actually the wonderful thing about talking to people is you hear all the different stories. Now it's
Yeah.
not wonderful to hear someone's gone through trauma. That's never a wonderful thing to hear, but it's a really important thing to show that there is another side. You can get out.
Yeah.
You
I
can
tell
leave.
people, I tell people all the time there is life on the other side.
Yeah,
And is it easy to get to it? Not necessarily. Is it going to take some work? Yes, it is. Are you going to get out of a bad relationship and immediately life is good? No, that's not the way it works. But there can be joy and happiness and success and love and all of those things that you seek.
yeah,
It's there. You just have to figure out how to get from where you are to where it is. So,
yeah. And I think that it's a really important thing. Also, someone who's been twice divorced, and when I met my current wife, and forever wife, I don't think she likes it when I
yes.
say current wife. The it was we had no intention of getting married, either of us.
Yeah.
We'd both been through it. We were
Yeah.
both kind of dipped in that
Jaded.
trauma piece. It was like this was horrible. It was hard.
Right.
You know,
Not worth it.
no. And then I
Yeah.
think when you meet the right person, as I
Yeah.
sincerely believe I have, that all changes because
Yes,
actually
it does.
it all then just makes sense. And I was in my mid 40s when I met Katie, and things happen. We now have a beautiful 18-month old daughter, and I now live in the south, the deep south, like the deep south of America. And
Yeah.
these are not things I thought were going to be in my plan.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but I do think and I think one of the things that I really like about your stories is that being open to what life gives you and then taking those opportunities, because I think life will give you the opportunities, it won't necessarily give you the answers. And I think if you grab hold of the opportunities, you get to
Yeah.
choose what you make of it. And
Yeah.
I really love the story about getting on the bike, and it's not your thing, it was your husband's dream, but it became yours as well. And I think
It
that's
did.
really
And I
cool.
and I think for me, like I said, I felt that I needed to prove to people. I was 56 when we did this, and I thought I was 57 when we did this, and I thought, I don't have anything left. I'm washed up, old. I'm just going to just sit on the sidelines of life until I die. I mean, that's the way I felt because I'd been through 14 years of just yuck. And I just couldn't see that there was going to be anything much better for me other than, well, I'll have some grandchildren I can enjoy, and that's going to kind of be my life. And I started feeling like, no, maybe there's more to me, but I need to prove that. I need to prove that I've got something left in me. And that trip proved to me that it was, first of all, me that needed proving. I don't think most people felt that way about me. It was me. And and then it was like, wow, everything opened up. I learned so much when you're sitting on a tandem bicycle, hours every day, all the way across the United States. You have a lot of time to think and reflect and work stuff out that you don't in normal life. Because in normal life, there's dishes that have to be done and groceries that have to be bought and people that need this and that and television shows and all of the other things that kind of like bombard you. And
Hmm.
so you just take all of the yuck that you have and you just bury it down and never really deal with it.
Yeah.
But on the back of a bike, there's you, and you, and and your mind is going, and you just start sorting it out and fixing it as you go. It was. I highly recommend that everybody in their life find something big and bold, not necessarily an athletic adventure, but something that they don't really believe is something that they ever thought they could do, and then do
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
Like really test yourself, open up those bounds, and like just give it a go.
It's interesting. I was in my regular day job. We were talking a little bit, um, doing sort of an end of year wrap up because my team are
Yeah.
mostly still based in New Zealand, one in Australia, one in the States, but a fairly mixed. And so, they're in New Zealand, it's summer, so over Christmas they take 2 weeks off. So they're off from
Right.
the 20th until the 6th, and so we're doing a bit of an end of year wrap up and talk around these things. And I think the question that got asked in our team meeting is, "What have you learned from this year? What's been
Right.
your learnings from this year?" And I was thinking about it, and this year's been a pretty big year. I've changed countries, and done things. I've done a lot of travel again for work, and my daughter's been growing up. My daughter's got some health challenges and some special needs. So there's been a lot of learning, and
Right.
what I think's really interesting for it, and this is what sort of your big and bold thing is, and it's something I've always believed, is life's too short for what ifs. And I think
Yeah.
I would hate to go, well, what if I had? I'd much rather go, cool, I wish I hadn't,
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
what if I had? Because I
Yeah.
think if you leave those questions unanswered, that's where you miss out on what would happen. Choosing to move countries in my mid 40s, and leaving a
That's
very
a
tight and close friend network,
that's
which was
tough. That's
family.
scary. Yeah.
In New Zealand where I was, and I did that when I was 22 as well. I moved from the UK to New Zealand, so I've done it twice, and you kind of go, they're big steps. And I still remember at 22 when I did it, my mum, who did not in any way, shape, or form want me to leave England at 22, she was like, "You got to do it because you're just going to go, what if?" And I think the
Right.
lesson that she said to me is, nothing's undoable, right? You can always come home. You can always go back. Most things in life are not undoable. You can always go
Yeah.
back.
You can find a way to fix it or to move forward from it and say, okay, that didn't work. Where are we going from here?
Yeah.
There's very few things that are truly permanent. I no longer believe in bucket lists. I hear people talk about bucket list items, and my thought is either put it on your list for this year or get it off your list. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. Don't make it a bucket list. I don't want to die with anything on my list. You know, go ahead and do it because you don't know what's coming down the pike. So you put it on the list and you say, well, I'm going to do that 17 years from now when we retire. You don't know that you get that.
No.
If it's something that means enough to you that you're going to put it on a 17-year long list, find a way to do it now. You know,
Yeah.
I, I I'm just my husband and I rode across the United States during COVID summer. Okay. We canceled our trip and then decided, okay, things are opening up enough. We think we can make it. I am so glad we did. My husband now has cancer. We wouldn't be able to do this. If we
I'm
had
sorry to hear that.
waited, yeah, if we had waited, there would have been no trip. And this trip is the thing that has gotten us through this whole cancer journey because we learned so much about one another and so much about ourselves and so many fabulous life lessons that we've been able to apply to going through this whole journey. And it would have, yeah, and that would have been a regret. And then we would have sat around. Not only would he have cancer, but then we would also have the regret, well, we never got to go across the United States on a
Yeah.
bike.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, right?
Right.
You can deal with, and I think that's one of the things is, as you approach things that haven't gone well, you don't want to have other things you'd wish you'd done.
Yeah.
Right. And I think
Yeah.
that's that piece. And I think that's been really important to us with Lily and being around family and those sort of things. It's that we want to make sure that we're giving everybody the opportunities that we need, us, our daughter, families, all of that sort of thing. I think that's
Exactly.
the crucial thing. One of the other things we sort of talked about a little bit at the start before we started recording was your journey as a youngster. Obviously, you stopped being an Air Force brat fairly young, you told me. But then there
Yeah.
was a fairly big step change, and obviously you had your Greek passport and all those things. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey as well, and kind of what
Right.
that did to your kind of how you felt about home, going from this probably fairly nomadic lifestyle to Midwest to the South.
Yeah. So I think for me, home has always been where people that love me are. Like it didn't have to be a place. I know a lot of people, and some of me kind of wishes that I had this. Like, oh, we always go home to grandma's house. It's the family home. It's been in the home for generations. Everybody goes there at the end of the year. We don't have that. My family did a lot more moving. Even my extended family did a lot more moving. There isn't a location to go to. And so because of that, we kind of more or less like created traditions that you did wherever you happen to be. So if you are, whether you're in Ohio or whether you're in North Carolina or wherever, there's certain things that you do. There are certain cookies that you bake at Christmas, and there's just things that you do. And so I kind of feel like home doesn't really have to be about a space as much as it's about a feeling. Like I even felt like my husband and I had home going across the United States. He and I were together. We would put up our tent where we were, what we were experiencing. That was home for them. We would FaceTime kids and do those kinds of things. But when I was 15, so we'd been in Ohio for some time. I was very happy. I came home from school one day, the middle of my freshman year in high school, and my house was for sale. And my parents had decided that dad was tired of the winter. He was tired of working for his dad. He wanted a fresh start. I think he was having a midlife crisis, but whatever. And the next thing you know, we've moved from Ohio to North Carolina, a place I had never even visited. And I was in the middle of my freshman year and I hated my parents for
I
several
can
months.
imagine. I can
I was
imagine.
one, yes, I was one very unhappy camper. My parents told me that if after a year, if my brother and I still were unhappy, that they would move back to Ohio. And I had every intention of remaining unhappy for 1 year so we could go back home. I mean, I had zero intention of assimilating. I did not want to be there. And it was a difficult move. The accent was very different. There were actually people who spoke to me and I had no idea what they were saying. Um, there were expressions in Ohio you never say. In North Carolina, when you say hello, you say, hey, how are you? Hey. Well, up in Ohio, you only say hey when you're angry. Hey, get out of there. Hey, what are you doing? Well, for the first 2 or 3 days at school, I was a nervous wreck. Hey, 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 like, what am I doing? Am I in the wrong spot? Right. It was, and you're trying to make friends in the middle of a year. And I dressed all wrong. And where I lived in Ohio, everyone dressed up for school. You tucked in your shirt, you wore khakis, you wore little espadrille shoes, you had a little scarf in your hair. And I get down here and everyone's wearing jeans and t-shirts. All the girls have boy Levi's on. They're wearing Converse tennis shoes and t-shirts that hanging out. And I show up on my first day looking like the queen, and it was like, oh, I went home and told my mom, we got to go to the store and buy me some boys Levi's. And she said, you'll look terrible in those. And it was like, not a problem.
It's about assimilation at this point. It is
Yes,
not
it
about
has
how I look.
nothing. That's nothing to do with that. And so yeah, it was very hard. But all it took was about 6 weeks in, I met a girl who took me under her wing and introduced me to all of her friends. And before long, I was going on camping trips and I had a family. I had a home. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, I'm okay. Well, now at this point, I've lived in North Carolina since 1979. And when people say, where are you from? I don't know what to tell them because in North Carolina, if you weren't born here, you're not from here. But I'm from here. Like in my mind, I no sooner belong in Ohio anymore. I mean, there are a few relatives, distant relatives there. I wouldn't mind going back for like, a 4-day vacation, but there's nothing there that is me anymore. So, I just think home is it's where you make it,
I
right?
could not agree more, and that's a battle in some ways in my brain that I go through. So I was lived in the UK till I was 22. I moved to New
Yeah.
Zealand and spent the better part of 23 years living there, and now I live here. So I live here. This is home. This is where my family is. This is where my daughter is. Where my wife is. My extended my immediate family are in Spain or the UK. I go back to the UK couple 2 to 3 times a year at the moment for work, and it does not feel like home.
It's
And
not home.
and what's really interesting is living here, I get asked quite a lot, where are you from?
Right.
And after I wanted to not kill the person who said, "Are you from Australia?" which for an Englishman who's lived in New Zealand for 20 years is about the most offensive thing
That's
you can call
okay.
me.
Okay.
I've said that a couple of times on the show, and it's like it doesn't get easier. Um, but then there's that. Well, yeah, I'm from the UK. That's where I grew up, and like I still support, all the English sports teams and all of that kind of
Right.
stuff. But New Zealand's probably the closest
More
to
your
what
home.
felt like
Yeah.
home. But what was really interesting for me on that is I went back there for work, and it was a fleeting visit. I didn't really catch up with any friends, so it was very odd. But it didn't feel like I thought it was going to when I went back for work a couple of weeks ago, at the start of November. So it is very. I think that whole where am I from home is very much in
Yeah.
flux at the
People
moment, which is
ask
really
me,
interesting.
people will say, where are you from? And it's like, So I always do that. So if you're asking where I was born, that would be Athens, Greece. If you're
Mhm.
asking where I did a good part of my younger years growing up, that would be Ohio. If you're asking where I feel like I'm from, that would be North Carolina, but I've also lived in many locations in North Carolina. So it's not like I've been in one spot. I've lived in many places in North Carolina. And so where am I from? Where would you like me to be from? You tell me the answer you're looking for, and then I'll give you where I'm from. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So tell me a little bit more about your book and kind of how that came
yeah,
about. Because obviously you did the tandem ride in 2020, and then wrote a
yeah,
number of novels post that,
yes, right,
and that then sort of 2024, you've written the book about what happened in 2020. So talk to me a little bit about that, how that came about, and kind of tell me a little bit more about the book.
yeah. So, so the book it's 10 little rules. It's things that I learned about life and myself while riding across the United States. And I tell people you'll learn a lot about the trip, the things, but it is not a travel log. If you want to know a day by day travel log, I kept a blog. Have at it. You can read everything. You can see every time I cried on the side of the road. I mean, you've got it all. But this is more like when I walked away from it, what did I walk away with? What were those lessons and that knowledge? I had every intention of writing this book from the beginning. I knew when I rode that I would want to write a book about this trip. I didn't recognize until I got home that I had these lessons that I had learned. I didn't know that was going to happen when we started out. I knew I would write something. I didn't recognize this is what it would be. And I actually wrote down my kind of lessons with little tidbits next to all of them 4 years ago, but I never found a good place to publish it. I felt like it doesn't really belong with my novels. My novels are historical fiction and they're completely, made up stuff in my head. And I love writing that and we'll write more of those. This was something different. And I thought I needed it to have a good home. So, talking about homes, I needed it to feel like it wasn't just a book stuffed in with a bunch of other books where it was going to get lost in the crowd. And I met a woman who had written a book called 10 Little Rules for a Blissy Life. And she lived here and then moved away, and we had kept in touch. And I found out through another friend, and I didn't even realize it, that she had a little publishing company called 10 Little Rules. And she was accumulating these people that had done things that they felt like would make a good book on like life lessons, things that you learn, etc. And I thought, huh, that sounds like it might be a fit. Well, I still have a little bit of imposter syndrome, and I was afraid to bring it up to her because I thought, oh, I don't want to I don't want her to feel obligated, and I don't want it to ruin any kind of weird, I don't want it to be weird. And I finally got to the point where it was, right now your book is not published. If you talk to her and she doesn't want the manuscript, your book is still not published. Nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Right? If you do talk to her and she does want the book, then you've made a change. So I finally just got up the guts, and I really did. I wrote a very quick email to her, just kind of blurted it out, said, I've written this thing, feel like it might be a fit. Tell me what you think. And boy, she got back to me right away. She said, I've always wondered if you were going to write a book about that trip. I would love to see what you've got. So I told her, I said, it's sad right now. Like, it is not, I would never show this to someone in this format, but let me show you what I have. And you tell me if you think that we could massage this into, and she wrote back and she said, it's not going to take much to massage. I love it. Let's do it.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I knew right away. So, talking about homes, this book, I had thought it was going to be lessons learned.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's 10 little rules because that's what but it just worked. And it was exactly what I needed to do. And then I was able to go through and find the things that I felt would benefit people the most. Like, what did I really learn? And for instance, one of my things is never quit on a bad day.
Yeah.
So we had a horrible day. There was a day that was so bad. We went 70 miles, which is on a tandem bicycle is a very long day.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hot and it was hilly when we had been told it was going to be relatively flat. We had 3 flat tires, and it was a horrible day. And by the time we finished, oh, and the wind was blowing the wrong direction. So we were into the wind the whole day. And by the time we were done, we were like halfway through Montana. And I thought, I'm not having fun. I hate this. We're done.
Why am I doing this? Why am I
I'm not,
here?
I'm not doing this anymore. And I was writing a blog, and I had put the blog out, and immediately I had a friend reach out to me who said, I think that what you've done so far is amazing. And if you decide to quit now, nobody would fault you. However, I have some advice. Don't quit on a bad day, because you'll always wonder, could I have gone on?
Yeah.
Would one more day have made a difference? She said, know that this has been a bad day, ride a few more days. And if at the end of, give yourself a time frame, you still say, this is not fun, then you're making a decision based on facts and not feelings. Well, the next day was fabulous. It was a beautiful day. We flew through the day. The wind was at our back. There was a storm behind us, and it literally blew us into the next town. And it was amazing. And we didn't quit, and we made it the whole way across. And I have used that idea of don't quit on a bad day over and over and over again, where you think, I can't do this anymore. And it's like, and today's a bad day.
Yeah.
So today's Monday. If on Friday I still feel this way, then we'll change course. And sometimes you still feel that way, and you decide, yes, indeed, quitting is exactly what is the right thing to do. And other times you realize, no, it was just a bad day.
Yeah.
I mean, don't we all have them? There are days that I don't want to be married. There are days I don't want to be a mother. There are days that I don't, but I really want to be all those things.
Yeah,
right?
I think that is a wonderful sentiment, and it's probably a great sentiment to finish on, to be perfectly honest, which is the don't quit on a bad day. I think that is when you think about the things you might miss out on because you give up when things get hard. I think that is,
and like I said, it's okay. it's okay to give up. It is okay to decide, to determine what I'm doing right now makes no sense for me anymore.
Mhm.
And it's okay. Like if you had moved to New Zealand and decided you really didn't like it, it would have been okay to say, made a poor decision. It's okay to go home. But you wouldn't want to do that and then regret it and get back home and think, oh, if I had stuck it out, would it?
Yeah.
So it's that idea of giving yourself more time to not quit in the moment of emotion.
Mhm.
When things really are crappy, we all want to quit. I mean, I don't know anybody who goes through something really crappy and goes, woohoo, let's do that again, right? And so I think that's the idea of can you take a step back, give yourself a little more space, and then make an actual decision with facts instead of just this emotional, it's been a horrible day, we had 3 flat tires, the wind's been against us, I'm so exhausted, I still have to figure out how to get across the street to eat at a stupid greasy burger place, I just want to go home. I mean, so
I hear you, and thank you so much for coming on, Terry. It's been
thank
a
you
real
for
pleasure.
having me.
Um, I will include a link to the book in our show notes.
Fantastic.
And thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I think it's been a really fun conversation. I've really enjoyed it today. So thank you again so much.
Thank
And
you.
thank you all for listening to this episode of Wherever I Lay My Hat. It's been great fun. I really enjoy doing these shows. If you would like to share your story, please reach out. Again, Dan at whereverIlayMyhat.com. And please do the usual things like subscribe, hit the notification bell on YouTube, leave a review or a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon Music. That all helps the show grow and helps us get more coverage and tell more stories. So, again, thank you so much and have fun.